Hey, welcome to a brand new edition of STV. On this week's show, we head west to ride some 2021 Arctic Cats. That should be a blast. We're also going to belt out another one for Ultimax. The Yamaha SR Viper is heating things up in first burn, and we head to the shop where we recoil from an old SRX. This is going to be a busy show, so stick around.
STV is brought to you by Yamaha, revs your heart. Polaris Snowmobiles, together we are born for more. Ford F-Series, Canada's best-selling line of trucks for 53 years. Tough, smart, capable.
Snowmobile belts are about as interesting as watching competitive shuffleboard down at the old folks' home. But as far as our sleds are concerned, these things are a critical component. Without them and the CVT transmissions that they make possible, a snowmobile would be a very different machine. So let's face it, the belt is the miracle that makes our world go round. Last year we went to the factory where Timken Ultimax belts are built in Springfield, Missouri. And one of the coolest things for me in that facility was the fact that the process for building belts has remained basically unchanged, and even some of the machines they're using today were used to build the first snowmobile belts back in the day. Even though the process has remained the same, the materials technology going into today's drive belts are light years ahead of the original designs. And I bet that if the original engineers who were involved back then could see how far sleds have come and the abuse modern drive belts have to take on the sleds we ride today, they wouldn't believe it. Back in the day, 10 horsepower was common, 18 for performance sleds like the Super Olympic. I think we've got more power in the starters on modern engines. Nowadays, some machines are topping 200 horsepower, and with modifications that can almost double that. Pure race sleds can pump out even more. And all that power is going through this little cross-section of rubber and cord. It's actually a little bit more than just that. The design of the rubber and cord are targeted for the demands of each application and must work together in order to live. Not all belts are created equal, which is the reason you should stick with the recommended belt for your application. A belt designed for a 50-horse machine will not survive long on a sled pushing 180. It's the job of the cord, aramid cord in the Ultimax belt, to carry the load and transfer the power. It's the job of the rubber to grip the sheaves on the clutches and to make sure that the cords remain perfectly flat. In this condition, a belt can withstand thousands of pounds of pull before a catastrophic failure, which is way more than any sled will ever produce. But if the stress on the cords isn't even across them all, the most stressed internal cords can break, which will quickly lead to a zipper effect across the belt and failure.
Check it out, come here. Somehow, through my superior diagnostic knowledge, I believe the belt is broken. I could be wrong, but I think this is our issue. Looks like it. Not often you can remove a belt through the belly pan though. That was a good hole.
Belt failures that come apart with enough force to exit the belly pan are not always preventable, especially on high horsepower machines, but there's a few things you can do that will at least help prevent an explosion. Number one, if there's any signs of damage on the belt at all, like a burn mark from spinning the drive clutch on a stopped belt, you should change it out. If there's cracks on the rubber down to the root between the ribs, change it out. If the belt looks like it's delaminating at all, change it out. The list doesn't stop there. Mechanical issues like properly adjusted clutches, alignment, engine mounts that aren't broken, and a system that's well maintained will all help with belt life. When it comes to belt life, a belt will always wear naturally with runtime. But if everything checks out with it okay structurally, you can chase the wear down by adjusting the secondary clutch to make up for the reduced width. Just remember to readjust it out when you eventually replace it with a new one. But even then, don't throw that old belt out if it's still relatively good, because it can make for a great short-term spare. And by the way, to improve belt life, take it easy for the first few heat cycles to break it in. You can do this by getting it up to operating temperature, that's around 100 degrees Celsius or so, and then letting it cool right off. 2 or 3 heat cycles will season a belt nicely. And pro tip for you, if you have a new spare belt, heat cycle this thing before you need it. That way, if you do have to change it out on a ride, you can start beating on this thing right away. Getting the most out of the life of the belt is always a good idea because these things are not cheap. But if you own an Ultimax belt, there is life after death because Ultimax stands behind their belts with a 1-year warranty. All you have to do is follow the instructions on the belt sleeve or go directly online to take advantage of the warranty. Online, you'll need to take a couple of photos of the remaining belt to make a claim. Now this is usually enough, but make sure to keep the shrapnel just in case the photos don't do it. If accepted, and with prepaid packaging, they'll send a new belt right to your door. When it comes time to choosing your new belt, Ultimax also has a handy belt finder tool on their website. This can be especially helpful when you're cross-referencing from another manufacturer's belt or trying to confirm what the experts at Ultimax recommend for your sled. And it's pretty extensive too, as it has listings all the way back to the 60s. This tool will also recommend one of 3 belt classes in the Ultimax arsenal as well. These classes are split by horsepower, with belts designed to work best within each respective power level. Beginning with the Ultimax Max belt, it's designed for fan-cooled sleds or liquids up to and including the 500cc class. This would also include vintage sleds that Ultimax has belts for. The Max has had decades of development and has been refined for the best balance of flexibility, grip, and dependability for long life and performance on lower horsepower sleds. The middle power class is served by the Ultimax Pro line. The Pro is designed with a thicker cross-section for increased surface contact with the clutch sheaves, and the specifically designed fiber-loaded rubber throughout the belt will ensure consistent grip over the life of the belt. This translates into cooler operating temperatures and quick acceleration. At the top of the horsepower level is the XS. This belt excels in this category because every aspect of its design has been optimized for high performance and horsepower, while at the same time providing excellent belt life in this demanding category. The XS accomplishes this with a rubber compound not found in any other belt on the market, one that's able to withstand the high belt temperatures that go along with high power. The backbone of the XS, like other Ultimax belts, is a band of aramid cord that provides zero stretch in each power class. In addition, details like a top cog design for cord stability and flexibility are found, along with a production process that maintains dimensional accuracy for belts held to a higher tolerance than other brands. This means that an Ultimax belt will work at the absolute peak of performance the OEs design their clutch systems to work at. Plus, you can't forget the experience Ultimax has in the CVT's history in the snowmobile and how that generational knowledge goes into each belt that comes out of the Springfield, Missouri plant. Belts are an awesome thing. They literally make our world go round, and without them we'd be dead in the water. Well, maybe snow in our case. Anyways, one last word of advice. Before your next ride, head out to your machine to check to make sure that there's still a spare belt in it and that if you need it, it's in good enough shape to get you home. Also, make sure it's the right belt for your machine. All little details that have burned me in the past.
First Burn is brought to you by Best Western Hotels and Resorts.
Over the last few years, Yamaha has become known as a high horsepower premium sled with machines like their Sidewinder. But this kind of overshadowed some of the other great models in their lineup. So if you're a buyer who's not looking for a 200 horsepower trail missile, maybe a Viper could be a good option. So we're going to shed some light on this honey. For 2020, the Viper lineup received some TLC detailed touch-ups. Most noticeable is the new bodywork that shares its design with its Sidewinder brethren. Although not a new design, this update does improve the aggressive look of the platform, and I think this new look will be welcomed with Viper buyers. The SR Viper LTX SE also gets a new coat of paint with a fresh blue, orange, and black theme, which I have to admit looks better in the sun than under artificial light. The SE is the middle of a lineup that starts with a black and gray straight up LTX, but then at the top end is a brand new GT model for 2020. The GT's got all the good bits a high mileage touring rider would look for, all wrapped up in a candy red shell. Now, to keep the GT riders warm, you get a heated seat and a tall windshield, but the real GT gold is the Fox QS3 front ski shocks and the rear shock on the skid frame. Now, these QS3s are the second best shock system on the snow. The only one better is the IQS version. That's the one that's changeable on the fly from the handlebars. Yamaha? Hint, hint. The SE is definitely the more sporty model, as you can see by the cut down windshield here, which might be something you want to change for those really cold days. The other part of this package is a more simple traditional suspension with an aluminum monotube HP gas shock package all the way around. These shocks are spring preload adjustable only, but once you have them set for your weight, they perform extremely well. It would still be nice to see a compression adjustment here for fine tuning, but Yamaha's managed to find a good middle ground for the setup. Plus, with less adjustment, there's less of a chance of screwing up the setup. It doesn't matter which of the three Viper packages you look at, each are built on the same stout SRV chassis and have the same 1049cc 4-stroke engine under the skin. This power plant lands the Vipers solidly in the 130 horsepower class, and for 2020 there's even a slight bump in power with a new ECU program. The engine also delivers a flat torque curve that 4-strokes are known for, which results in a ride that is deceptively fast. The 1049 Genesis is a bit of a sleeper in its class. Riding a Viper, you don't immediately feel the power, and I think that's because this engine is so smooth. Out of the hole, it doesn't come alive the same as a 600 class 2-stroke, but it does catch up quickly, and then on the trail in corner-to-corner squirts, it has all the speed of a 2-stroke, just no drama. It would be like if Dwayne Johnson was an English butler. He could deliver you a spot of green tea without spilling a drop, while at the same time defending you from an attacking ninja. This mild-mannered power takes a bit of getting used to, but is a real benefit for actually trail riding like a normal human being. On longer trips, Vipers are always one of OSM's go-to sleds. In addition, the Genesis engine also delivers on longevity, and that's because they're known for generational reliability. Fuel economy is also a huge debate between the 2 and 4-stroke crowd, and while we've seen better numbers out of the 4-strokes at the pump, there are usually only a few dollars difference between the 2-strokes and 4. Basically, if two sleds are making roughly the same power and ridden roughly the same pace, they should be consuming roughly the same amount of fuel, and our pump numbers show that. Of course, with a 4-stroke, you don't have to add the expensive 2-stroke oil to the tally. No matter what Viper model you're into, they're each a heavy hitter in this class, and as 4-strokes continue to gain popularity into the snowmobile world, I think you're going to see a lot more of these snakes on the snow. In early 2019, Arctic Cat changed the rules of the game when they announced their 2020 lineup would be spring order only. That meant if you didn't put your dough down in their spring sales program, you weren't going to ride a 2020 Cat. Now, there were some 2020s available at dealerships in the fall of 19, but not many. This whole process was to break the cycle of flooding dealerships with sleds that they may or may not have been able to sell, breaking an over-inventory problem Arctic Cat had in their pipeline. If this sounds similar to what Yamaha did recently, you'd be right. Now well inside this new deal, all reports sound like this sales process shift is working out, and Arctic has even continued to change the rules by introducing their 2021 lineup before most people have even ridden their 2020s. This is way ahead of the traditional next model year announcements that usually drop just ahead of the spring sales season. Strategically, it's a brilliant move by AC. They have created for themselves a huge head start on marketing their 2021s before the competition and have had this topic in the media all to themselves. Of course, this is all in an effort to build their 2021 Snowmageddon promotion. By the time you see this, the news of the 2021 lineup is, well, old news. But for us recently in Wyoming, we had our first chance to ride some of the new models. We heard about the new lineup just ahead of the general public, so we knew what we'd be riding, and the most anticipated sled for us was the new Riot, with the monorail rear skid. The Riot X delivered on our expectation and is on point for its intended audience. First off though, it's not a super deep snow machine as it's only shod with a 146-inch track and a 2.6-inch lug. But as a play sled for the meadows, it works. The Riot continues to have the vertical steering post and the Arctic mountain front suspension that's convertible between 39.5 and 41.5 inches. But the real news is the Alpha rear suspension technology that's been making a name for itself in Arctic's M line. Riders who wanted a play machine with the Alpha now have it. The other big news is the Blast, a youth-oriented sled with a 400cc engine and 60 horsepower that fits right between the 200 class sleds and the full-size ZRs. Now this may sound a lot like Polaris' Evo, but where the Evo was more of a lowered full-size sled, the Blast is a bit more of a purpose-built machine in this category. Still on a 121-inch track for the trail model, the new bodywork borrows elements from the Cat line for a smaller, less intimidating ride experience. The Blast will be available in 3 configurations, a Trail ZR version, a utility crossover LT model, and Mountain. The latter two stretch the track length to 146 inches, but the Mountain Blast has the Alpha 1 rear skid, giving riders of this model the best Cat has to offer for deep snow. Other 2021 models in the ZR and Mountain platforms receive detail updates and suspension changes, along with chassis stiffening measures like a new carbon fiber TCL, along with a new engine mounting and simplified lighter A-frame. With new models and a host of changes along with bold strategic moves like the early release of the 21s, it shows Arctic is serious about the snowmobile industry and is looking at the long term for the success of this iconic brand. So today in the shop, there's a small job on the old SRX here that I wanted to solve, and that's because I found a problem I'd like to fix before it bites me in the butt on the trail, and that's a recoil rope that's a tad on the short side. I realized this was an issue when I was doing a compression test and pulling the recoil right to what felt like an early end. The rope probably got shortened up in the past at a fray to prevent a breakage and then having the rest of the recoil rope wind back up into the basket. I mean, I've done this myself, but it's a short-term solution only because when it does get short and you pull it like this and it stops, you do run the risk of breaking the rope or doing damage to the recoil mechanism itself. That's why we're going to put a longer rope on. You can do this job yourself if you're reasonably competent turning wrenches, but you have to remove the recoil off the end of the engine, which usually means removing the exhaust to get to it. So if you've been dealing with exhaust springs, you know how hard these things are to get on and off, but a really cheap trick is to take an old screwdriver and grind or file a hook into the end of it like this, and you can use that as a spring removal and reinstallation tool. That's really cheap, but for an even cheaper option, you can use a bootlace. Simply just loop it around and you can use that to hook on the spring and pull it off. Not only is this free, it's a great little trailside tip if you need to get an exhaust spring off in a hurry when you're out on the trails. And like I say, it's free. You'll also have to cut the handle off the end of the rope to unthread it through the chassis. Now here, a pair of needle nose vice grips clamped to the rope will keep it from recoiling into the basket before you want it to. Yeah, it's this spring here. You want to do whatever you can not to remove. That's, if it comes out, it's gonna go everywhere. I'm not even gonna touch it anymore. Be very delicate. That's a hand grenade. So that little notch there is where the coil spring hooks into, right in there. All right, so just drop it down in. Oh, there we go. Look at that. You know you got it right when you can rotate it in reverse and you can feel that spring being engaged. So I think we're good. All right. That's it. It's really pretty simple. The biggest thing to watch out for in here is that clock spring. If it comes out, you've got another job on your hands. Now for me, speaking of the last job on my hands, is to get this in place and figure out where those triple pipes go. Hey, thanks for hanging with us this week on STV. I hope you had a riot. Till next week, keep the rubber side down.
STV has been brought to you by Ultimax Belts. Performance driven, performance proven. CKX. Wear your passion. On Snow Magazine. For snowmobilers from snowmobilers.
Hey, welcome to this week's go-around of the YouTube comment of the week, and this one is a special one. Now, it does date back to our triple tour from last season, and it comes to us from a fella by the name of Mike Hawk. I'm not sure if he's trying to be cheeky there or not. But anyways, it's in bold, so we did notice it, and we'll just take this pie in pieces here. So it starts with, maintain it like a hack and you will break down. Yeah, fair enough, but sometimes you just break down. He continues to say, and by the way, it's not cool to zip tie and tape it together. Yeah, but sometimes you gotta get home, and zip ties and tapes can get you there in some cases. That shows lack of knowledge and effort, failure to you. Really? Well, I think failure would be to not carry zip ties and tape in your pocket when you're riding a 30-year-old sled, Mike Hawk. But clearly, you're probably not into 30-year-old sleds. Actually, come to think of it, I recognize your name somewhere. Aren't you also known as Richard Cranium? Yeah, I think that's who you are. Anyways, I appreciate everybody's comments, the good ones and the bad ones. Gordo here, awesome. Love the comment. Keep them coming, because I love reading them.